What's up, everybody? How are we doing tonight? Welcome back to another weekly live stream here on Celtics Digest. I'm your host, Bruce Velez, and we got a lot to talk about with the Boston Celtics, as you can tell from the frame of the title and from the thumbnail. Someone on the Boston Celtics that is expected to have a big role this season just had a fantastic debut in the Euro basketball tournament for Team Portugal. So we're going to break down and go over Neemiš Queta and how dominant he was in the group play opener for the team, and how, even though it is a one-game sample size, how we can look at the positives and negatives from that game to evaluate what he can bring for this Celtics rotation this season, as this is exactly what Celtics fans want to hear. They want to see a guy named Neemiš Queta really stand out for this team, because obviously the depth in the center position isn't the greatest. So we're going to dive in and explore all of that on this weekly live stream. It is just me today. Unfortunately, my guy Patrick is over at Yankees Stadium working the game, so shout out to Patrick. Best of luck with him at the radio station there tonight, and I'm hoping that, he has some great content for you guys after here for these next couple of days and weeks, because the Eurobasket is going to continue, and I'm hoping Neemiš Queta can really dominate. But we got some people here in the chat, so shout out to you guys. We got Mouthpiece in here and NH Guy saying what's up. So how you guys doing? I hope you guys are enjoying the off season so far. It has been a little bit slow, a little bit boring in my opinion as well, but I do think with Eurobasket now kind of kicking off, we will see it starting to trend in the right direction, and exactly that way is for Neemiš Queta as well. So let's dive in and let's talk about Neemiš Queta, as he's been a little bit of a polarizing player for the Boston Celtics in the fan base. For me personally, I've always been a big fan of him. If you want to go back and check out, one of the earliest videos here on the channel about Neemiš Queta, it's right when the Celtics signed him from the Stockton Kings and brought him in on a two-way deal, and I was hyped from him from the start. He was someone who was in, running of the G League MVP competition, and seemed like someone that was on the cusp of making the NBA, and if he had the right opportunity or, could present the tools to be that kind of guy, he could dominate. And we've seen him have some stunts here with the Celtics where he has looked a little bit, frustrated on the offensive and defensive end for these last couple of seasons, but there's also been some bright spots for him, specifically last year as well, when Kristaps Porziņģis was down for the first half of the year. We went into the preseason with Luke Kornet and Neemiš Queta as those two kind of starting centers, with Al Horford playing that power forward position. And we did see is them really do pretty solid. Kornet mainly that main starting center, but Queta getting some run, and even in some matchups getting the better of the game compared to Luke Kornet, and even getting the starting job going into some aspects of that season. But now with Luke Kornet gone, obviously Al Horford gone, Kristaps Porziņģis gone, there is a big hole at that center position, and a guy in Neemiš Queta really needs to kind of dominate and really excel in that space. Bobby Manning and Chris Forsberg on the Garden Report talked about this today from CLS Media as well in their live stream, so if you missed that, go check that out. But Joe Mazzulla has always really liked a guy named Neemiš Queta, and I think we're going to see the best of him come out this year with that kind of motivation from Joe, and with him needing to be that best guy for the Celtics here. But like Noah Dalzell tweeted out, in the game versus the Czech Republic, who struggled a lot on the defensive end, to be honest, weren't the greatest team from looking back at these highlights. He had a fantastic game, was clearly the best player there on the court for Portugal, but not even just that, just in the game in general. 23 points, shooting 11 for 15 from the field, where his first shot was a three-pointer, which was absolutely crazy to see him stretching beyond the arc, and we'll talk about a little bit later here how that could be very impactful for him being better for the Boston Celtics. But 18 rebounds, 3 offensive ones, 4 blocks, and 2 steals with a plus 21. I'm really liking this a lot. It's absolutely fantastic to just see all of this. Queta went off in his first game, like we mentioned, and there are some clips here. I'm not going to be able to show the clips, or else we will get copyright struck, obviously. But like Chris Forsberg said here, 0 career NBA three-pointers, but knocking down a triple to open Eurobasket and has the celebration down. You just love to see that for the Boston Celtics, and I'm very hyped for a guy and Queta to kind of take that leap for the Celtics because, like we mentioned, there is a hole at that center position. If we hit the wrong button there, if we want to go in and look at the Celtics depth chart here, obviously, we can look and compare this to where Queta kind of falls in for the Boston Celtics. And at the moment, when looking at that center rotation here for the Boston Celtics, you can clearly see he's the starting center according to CBS Sports Boston. But Chris Boucher's there, Luka Garza's there, and Xavier Tillman's there. There's no true standout starting center. And a guy in Chris Boucher obviously has some great experience in the NBA, has been a veteran for the last couple of years for the Raptors, leading them in bench total points, all of that jazz. He is someone that has been very, very dominant, but in the NBA, but a guy in Queta could take that next step and could take that next leap, something that fans might not really be expecting, which is something that I would really like to see for the Boston Celtics, in my opinion, is to see a guy in Queta kind of really grow. Like I mentioned earlier with Bobby Manning and Chris Forsberg on the Garden Report earlier today, they were talking about how Neemish Queta is someone that kind of respects Joe Mazzulla and kind of works through the pain that Joe Mazzulla kind of gives him and understands that. And there have been quotes in the past that I've seen from the people that have gone to practice, guys like Bobby Manning, Chris Forsberg, Jack Simone, John Corrales, and Noah Dalzell, and many others that have been at the Celtics practices that have been able to ask Neemish Queta this. And I believe when they were talking about it, he was, I don't remember the quote exactly off the top of my head, but I remember them saying that Joe is just kind of like tough on you, and you kind of got to, at first it's a little bit annoying, but then after that you kind of just fight through it, and obviously the confidence kind of just builds within you, and it just proves to be out there on the court. And a guy like Neemish Queta, I think, can kind of come through this adversity, specifically with there not being, a big guy in his way in this center rotation. I think this is the perfect opportunity for him, amongst many other guys in the Celtics rotation, to really stand out and be that dominant force. And Queta has been working on his game, like I mentioned. He shot some three-pointers, hit some of those today for Team Portugal, but he has been working on his free throw shooting as well. Bobby Manning had a whole article where he went into detail talking, where he traveled to Portugal, and that was one of the strengths Neemish Queta wanted to get better at going into next year. And if that can help out not only at the free throw line, but stretching out to the three-point line, could be very beneficial for the Boston Celtics, just having him that just in his arsenal, as the Celtics are very effective from shooting the three-point ball, but also to just give him a little bit more versatility in his game, because Queta has been solid at some things. Like, he looks to be a little bit of a better screener compared to last year. He looks like to be a better defensive rim stopper and rim protector. There obviously are some quarrels with his game last year. Like, it seemed like in the 2 seasons ago where he was a little bit too fast, a little bit too flustered. It seemed like he wasn't really in control. There were times where he would, post up in the back and just try to post up and miss multiple opportunities right at the rim, and would just get the rebound and keep continuing to missing. He's got to just kind of get a little bit more composed, I think, in that regard. But I think kind of training this whole offseason, getting ready for Euro basketball, we can kind of see it. And obviously, there is going to be some discrepancies from Euro basketball and playing against those top-tier athletes, where Queta is the best player on Portugal compared to the Boston Celtics, where he's probably, in the starting lineup, but on the roster, probably the 8th or 9th best guy in the team. But ultimately, in my opinion, that still proves that if he can look at least a little bit decent in these Euro basketball games and play against some of the NBA talent that is around there and actually hold his own, then maybe he could actually be a little bit better than expected for the Boston Celtics this year, where a lot of people figure they're kind of just throwing him into the trenches because he's the longest tenured center on the roster. Maybe we could actually see him have some developments in his game and feel a little bit more like a balanced presence for the Boston Celtics. And that's something that, not only as someone who's Portuguese, but someone that is a big fan of Neemish Queta's game without that kind of bias, would love to see for the Boston Celtics. So, Mouthpiece saying, gotta love seeing Queta doing his thing, and I appreciate that. I do really, really love Neemish Queta, and I think this year, just with his opportunity, we're going to see him look obviously a little bit better. There's going to be some times, don't get me wrong, where he's not going to be the best there on their court. He's going to have some foul trouble. He's going to have some issues scoring at the basket, right? But hopefully he's a little bit more of a polished player in those bigger moments, so that there's very few of them, and even if they do come, it's not as of a big glaring issue. Because what happened was last year and a couple of seasons ago is, with the Celtics having that depth, Queta could be played in those instances if Porziņģis was hurt, or if they needed to give rest to Al Horford on a back-to-back or something like that. And the Celtics could afford that because they had the depth really there. Now with, Boucher, Garza, Tillman, and Queta as the only really centers in the room and rotation, it's very difficult for the Celtics if he gets in foul trouble. That means they're going to have to run a lot of Chris Boucher center, or maybe have to give more minutes to Xavier Tillman or Luka Garza and depend on them a little bit more, which could sway away the playing of Queta down the line into the season. And my guy Patrick Billings is here. What's up, Pat? How you doing? Saying shout out Bruce, man. Had to tune into the last stream from the car, brother. Celtics Digest. We'll miss you. Queta to the moon. Appreciate you so much, Patrick. Yes, thank you for tuning in. You're an absolute beast. And you are right. It is going to stink. Obviously, this is, if you guys do not know, I am leaving Digest Media, unfortunately. Just with the things of me wanting to pursue in writing, I'm going to be stepping away from YouTube. And in that case, obviously, and stuff like that, I'm still going to be connected with trying to do the Boston Celtics and work like that, and still stay connected to Patrick and everything, because me and Patrick obviously have had a great relationship on here on Celtics Digest, and I'm wishing nothing but the best for him, for Jace, for the company here over in Digest Media, because Ben and everybody is absolutely fantastic. But this is kind of my last stream. Patrick and I had our last stream together last week, and just kind of finishing out the week here, trying to pick up some videos where the news does kind of come into play for today. I could have done a video on this, but I definitely did want to do it, I think, in the stream form, because I wanted to at least have one final stream with everyone and kind of give at least one big send-off for everyone, or people watch the VOD, or however they kind of really get into this. But like I said, thank you so much, Patrick. It's been absolutely great, and I can't wait to see what you do with these streams. Who knows, maybe Patrick will have me back on here. I told him that I'd be willing to do that throughout this season if he ever needs someone to hop on here to discuss some Celtics stuff. So we'll definitely still be in communication, and I'll definitely be talking about that. But yeah, Neemish Queta looks absolutely to be a beast here in Eurobasketball. Now, like I said, it's only one game. We have to take this with a grain of salt, right? Next game, he could go out there and he could get absolutely, slammed up and, not have any opportunity. Let me look at the bracket real quick so that I can see who Portugal plays next. Because if I see that, then we can see what's going on. I accept. You can take the data. Because I don't know who's in. I have not paid attention to this. Like I said, it just started up today, so kind of perfect to kind of get into it, right? Portugal beat Czech Republic. They are in Group A. So the other two teams are Latvia, Turkey, Serbia, and Estonia. So we'll have to wait and see who they play next. Let me see. Do they play Thursday? No. So C and D play Thursday. So my guess is they play Friday. And on Friday, they play Serbia. Nice. And obviously, as we know, Serbia has Nikola Jokic. So, going to be a little bit difficult for a guy in Neemish Queta, as his next game is going to be versus arguably the best player in the NBA. But I am expecting to see some good stuff. Yeah, Filip Petrusev, they have Bogdanovic, Tristan Vukovic, who is on the Wizards, Nikola Jovic, who is on the Heat, Vasily Misic, who just went back to the EuroLeague, but was obviously on some other teams. So they have some NBA guys over there, and when looking at this, I should probably pull this up and kind of look at it for you guys here so you guys can see. But yes, Jovic, obviously Bogdanovic, Jokic, a bunch of other players as well. It's going to be tough competition for Portugal and Neemish Queta, as, like I mentioned, he is the first player in NBA history that is Portuguese to get a guaranteed contract. So obviously none of these players are going to be, playing in the NBA. And with Jokic being the better player and, best player on their team as well, I assume that they're going to be playing through him, trying to see what they can do with Neemish Queta. But like I mentioned, if Queta can kind of look not like amazing, right? Because it's Nikola Jokic, but look solid or hold his own defensively against Jokic, that's going to bring his intrigue going into next year a lot higher because people are going to value what a guy in Namish Kid can do. I feel like a lot of people think he's just the Celtics' best option at center because they don't really have much. And a lot of people view the Celtics to be a bottom 3, bottom 5 center rotation across the league. And if a guy like Queta can actually be, pretty solid in offense and defensively as being a shot blocker, rim protector, be able to set screens and work in the offense within guys like Peyton Pritchard and Derrick White running the pick and roll, but also being able to space out the floor a little bit. If he can have that 3-point shot, we could see a guy in Queta maybe develop to being maybe a top 15 type of big by the end of the season to where he's respectable across the board. And the Celtics, once again, have a very solid piece that they were able to get from the G League and build up over these last couple of seasons to really find their full potential and peak. And I think that's what we're going to see with a guy in Queta. This is not a gap year, book it, we will compete super hard. I like this from Birkin here because we talked about this in yesterday's video, Patrick and I, where we discussed that a player that Peyton Pritchard also said it is not a gap year. He said that every year that he has played basketball, he has been on a winning team, one that has been competing for championships, trying hard, trying to be their best, and he's never had an opportunity or been on a team that's ever said, let's tank or let's not be good, let's not compete for a championship. So he's not thinking that way. Players like him, Sam Hauser, Derrick White, Jaylen Brown, Namish Queta, everyone on the Boston Celtics has something to prove this year. Jaylen Brown to be that number 1 guy. Derrick White to be that number 2 guy. Peyton Pritchard to be better than a 6-man and a continued starter across the league. Namish Queta to break out into the NBA as a potential starting center or a guy that can be respected in starting lineups. Guys like Baylor Shireman, Jordan Walsh, Hugo Gonzalez, young guys trying to compete to get onto the roster to fight for a competition spot, to be in the rotation. A guy in Sam Hauser who wants to be, after this year, if he can be a steady starter across the league. Joe Mazzulla, someone that wants to prove that he can be a top-tier coach across the league and isn't carried by his rosters as people think that he is. This is something that everybody in the Boston Celtics wants to see happen. They don't want to be bad, and I think with all of that kind of coming together, we're not going to see a gap year. And like you said, Burke, and I completely agree. He said, Queta looks really good. He's very open to developing, and that's the best thing, too, about Queta. He's very open to developing, like you mentioned. He wants to get better in every asset of the game, stretching out to the 3-point line, getting better at the free throw, feeling a little bit more poised as a rim deterrent and as a shot blocker. And that's just music to my ears, in my opinion. And Patrick said, when Bassey signs, you're the first one on call. I got you. When the mystery man comes to Boston, to Beantown, you got me. And Patrick, when Bassey signs, you know what image to use for the thumbnail. You know. I'm not going to say, but you know. The mystery man, Charles Bassey. I wonder what's going to happen to Charles Bassey because that's a good thing to talk about because he wanted to come back to the Celtics as reported by, I believe it was Noah Dalzell, where even after he had his opportunities with the Celtics in the Summer League and only playing 3 games and not playing the final 2 after he had some other commitments, it was stated that he might go to Europe. But after that further consideration, it was stated that he'd want to come back to Boston and be in Boston. Now, the Celtics, after hearing that, went on and made some more moves as they traded Georges Niang and got R.J. Lewis Jr., and then waived Miles Norris, and then signed Amari Williams to the final 2-way spot, and then waived J.D. Davison, and now have an open roster spot after they signed Chris Boucher. So with adding Chris Boucher, to me, it signifies that that was a replacement for Georges Niang as a better, because I feel like Georges Niang, both of them are pretty solid bench players. I think Boucher's a little bit better as a starter. Ultimately, I do think that Boucher can ultimately play the 4 and 5 a little bit better than Georges Niang. Even if Niang is a better 3-point scorer and he's better at one specific special skill, I do believe that a player in Chris Boucher is a little bit better. But I do think that with having Chris Boucher playing that 4 and 5, having Tillman who can play that 4, Kate who can play that 5, Garza who can play that 5, it kind of really limits them to bring in Charles Bassey, especially with Amari Williams on that 2-way. And we know how Joe Mazzulla likes to sprinkle in those guys, like Drew Peterson or J.D. Davidson or even Namish Queta on those 2-way contracts and getting minutes throughout the season. So if they have some injuries or see some struggles, maybe a guy like Amari Williams does get some playing time versus some mediocre teams like versus New Orleans Pelicans or something like that. We could ultimately go and see that throughout the season, and that's something to keep an eye on with Bassey. obviously the roster spots are all filled too. The training camp spots with signing Rod Harper Jr. now to that final training camp spot with Aaron Scott, Hayden Gray, and Jalen Bridges. The Celtics are kind of locked up, can't really bring anybody in, so definitely something to keep an eye on with their only roster spot. Maybe they do sign Bassey, maybe they cut one of the training camp Exhibit 10 guys and then bring Bassey in and still use him. That's something to also keep an eye on, but I have no idea what's going to happen. Birkin saying, if Bassey pans out and balls, the face of Philly fans, priceless. Yeah, that would be awesome too, because I remember he was drafted by Philly, and then he was cut by them, I believe, and then he went to the Spurs and played there for a little while, where he had some injuries, and that's why the Spurs didn't pick him up. They went with their other backups and guys like Luke Cornett and Kelly Olynyk, so that's where Charles Bassey has kind of fallen out here for the San Antonio Spurs, and that's where he's an option for the Boston Celtics, where Bassey is probably, someone kind of in the camps of like a Bol or something like that, who is just kind of out there in free agency, wanted to come to the NBA, back or get a contract in the NBA, but might not, and ultimately might have to go to Europe or might have to go to the G League or something like that. That's something to keep an eye on. But ultimately, I want to thank you guys for hanging out here. We talked about Neemish Queta. He was an absolute bucket today for Team Portugal. They got their first win in Eurobasket since 2007, which I think is a great thing for the country. And I think we're going to see some great play from Neemish Queta coming into this season, going into training camp. I think he's going to have a lot of intrigue, and with him most likely being that starting center, unless Chris Boucher does get the starting center job and they play Jaylen Brown at that power forward, I would expect him to be getting a lot of talk around him and discussion, regardless if people are in favor of him starting, if they're not in favor of him starting, and then if he does start, how he looks out there. If he looks really fantastic, the fans are going to be bought in. They're going to be ready to run with Neemish Queta. If not, we might see some things from the last couple of seasons where people are saying he's unplayable and doesn't deserve to be on the court. But ultimately, I think Queta is going to continue to grow, look promising going into this season, and even though he might not be a top-tier starting center across the league, I think he'll be able to hold his own in that starting center job going into the season and be a decent representation for the Boston Celtics, and I am excited for that. Let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comment section. Before we do leave, Birkin has one last question. Bruce, Ugo must go regular minutes from Joe. You agree? We must tap into his potential. I don't know what regular minutes you mean by that. I think that Ugo probably is going to be competing with Jordan Walsh and Josh Minott, in my opinion, for the backup 3 minutes, backup 4 minutes, because I would say the lineup probably is going to be Peyton Pritchard, Derrick White, Sam Hauser, or Jaylen Brown, Chris Boucher, Neemish Queta, and then Sam Hauser and Anthony Simons off the bench. I would expect Minott, Walsh, and Ugo to kind of compete for those backup wing spots, and I do think that, I don't know so who's going to get the nod. It might personally be Jordan Walsh, just because he has been there the longest, but Minott has the most NBA experience, so maybe it is him. Ultimately, I do think it will be a little bit of a training camp battle, but if Ugo doesn't get it really his rookie year, I don't think there's too much to lose, because as we've seen with the other rookies in Baylor Sharman and Jordan Walsh, they really didn't get that much burn. Now, obviously, different expectations. Those teams were a little bit deeper, but maybe we do see Ugo getting some more opportunity, but I feel like they would really rather tap into guys who have already had that NBA experience first, kind of see how they really pan out as the veterans, and then maybe lean into Ugo a little bit more. I don't really want to watch Boucher getting pushed around at the 5. I personally don't want to either. I think he's better at the power forward. I would like to see him play that power forward, but I think we will see him transition into some small ball 5. Maybe if they throw some lineups with a Jordan Walsh and Josh Minott out there, maybe if they run an Xavier Tillman, Chris Boucher bench backup big lineup for sometimes throughout the year. That's something to keep an eye out on as well. Ultimately, the Celtics could also, throughout the season, make some more moves to grow and get some new additions in that front court. They still have the tradable contract of Anthony Simons that they could use at any point or the season, or they could use some other moves as well with some smaller contracts to once again maybe find another flyer that can maybe stand out for this next direction of the team. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, showing your support here on the channel. Once again, it's been an absolute blast to work with Celtics Digest for the last couple of years. This is my final live stream. You might still catch me on some videos before I do leave, before the end of the month, depending on the news cycle here with the Celtics. But unfortunately, this will be the last stream, so thank you to everyone that has shown their support. Obviously, I have been here since the beginning of Celtics Digest, just almost now 3 years ago, which is just absolutely insane. We started this channel going into the year of not yet last year, but the year previous, where the Celtics won the NBA championship, and we started rising. You guys were absolutely fantastic. We had our watch-along streams, we had our post-game streams, then we started doing our watch-along streams again, then we did, weekly streams now. I really do appreciate everyone really being here. Thank you guys so much. I know some names always from months and years, new names coming in here as well. I know that Patrick, I know that Jace are going to do a fantastic job with you guys talking about the Boston Celtics. And like I said, just because I'm leaving Digest Media doesn't mean I'm going to be shying away from the content, as I still will be, keeping up with Patrick and still talking with him. So you never know, you might still see me as a guest here and there, maybe for some live streams in the near future. But if not, you can follow me over on Twitter at Bruce Velez, where I still will talk about the Boston Celtics, the Phoenix Suns, and NBA basketball as a whole. And if you do enjoy my content, you can definitely check out where I'll continue to be branching out, because just because I'm leaving Digest Media doesn't mean I'm going to be stopped talking about basketball. So I really do appreciate all the love and support you guys have given over these last couple of years. It has meant the most. And for the last time on a stream, I will be saying peace out, have a great rest of your night, and go Boston Celtics. Thank you, everyone.